The Alabama Crimson Tide travel to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers in what serves essentially as a college football playoff eliminator. Helping us break it all down from the Alabama perspective, Alex Scarborough of Bama 24/7 joins us once again. Alex, appreciate you taking the time, man. It's always a pleasure to have you on. What's going on?
It's my pleasure to be on. It's a busy week, to say the least, with a lot on the line.
A lot on the line, indeed. This is a game, Alex, that if you can't get excited for this one, you probably just don't have a pulse. I mean, we've seen it over the last 20-plus years, the intensity in this ball game, although a little bit of a different dynamic this year. We'll get into that more in a second. But I want to talk to you, Alex, about Alabama to this point in the season, obviously coming off of the bye week, 6-2 overall, 3-2 in conference. You've got the two losses, one to Tennessee and Neyland coming in the third Saturday in October, and then the loss to Vanderbilt, which at the time, maybe even then, we didn't realize how good this Vanderbilt team is, but still one of the biggest upsets we've ever seen in SEC history. What's the vibe and the mood around this team and this program specifically coming into the month of November? And again, going on this 4-game stretch that is essentially going to decide their college football playoff hopes and fate.
Anxiety might be how I sum up the mood. Not necessarily internally when you talk to coaches and players, but just kind of like fans wondering where this program is, because if you look at the first half against Georgia, they look like they're all world. They should go walk in and win a national championship. Everything's great. Everything since then is sort of deteriorated that fact, right? Like the second half against Georgia wasn't pretty. If Ryan Williams doesn't catch that incredible touchdown pass, we might be having a very different conversation about this game. And then obviously the Vanderbilt loss. It's a road loss, but Alabama had like 2-1 fans at that game. And then you expect them to come back against South Carolina. It doesn't happen. They're lucky to win that game and then lose at Tennessee. The Missouri game sort of righted the ship a little bit, in the sense that while everything was not perfect, everything finally came together. When you're talking about offense, defense, special teams, there had been flashes of both of those sides of the ball to that season, but they hadn't come together in conjunction, and that happened. It was a dominant game, 34-0. Alabama doing Alabama things. So now the question is that a function of Missouri not being as great, of Brady Cook being injured and Drew Pine just not being the same type of quarterback? Or can they replicate that going on the road against what I think everyone will agree is a much more talented LSU football team?
Alex, you're as close to that program as any. Like I mentioned, the Crimson Tide are coming off of the bye week. From the conversations you had with coaches and players alike, what are some of the things, or is there one key thing that, this football team was most trying to accomplish or get shored up, right? Because at this point, you can say you are who you are, but is there anything in particular they're focusing on, just trying to make sure they've got hammered down going into the most important part of their schedule?
I think it's kind of, you take things on both sides of the ball. On defense, I think one of the big concerns going into this game is going to be pass rush. Alabama's secondary has, I think, overperformed based on what they have, what they brought back, all the new faces they have. They're very thin. I think they have 13 total scholarship players in the secondary. Ideally, they'd have to have a minimum of 19. So that tells you kind of where they are. But to aid that, you need a pass rush. And they have had guys flash, a Quay Russo, a LT Overton, at times a Q Robinson, but those guys have not consistently won one-on-one matchups. That happened a little bit against Missouri. That's going to happen against LSU. And we know that's a tall task when you're talking about who the quarterback is. Garrett Nussmeier, an NFL arm by any standard, major weapons in the receiving game. And oh, by the way, you have 2 offensive tackles who look like first-round picks. So getting there is going to be difficult. But I think more they're trying to find consistent identity on offense. And that's consistently being able to do all things: protect the quarterback, run the football, and then generate explosive plays. The running game was really a non-factor when you're talking about Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. For most of the season, there were flashes, but not a game that was really a signature. The Missouri game gave them that, but the passing game wasn't quite there. The explosive plays have fallen by the wayside. So I think it's sort of just maybe simplifying what they're doing and trying to get back to the core of, look, we're an explosive passing game. Let's get to that. And if we can layer on a running game, we're going to be awfully hard to stop.
Alex, maybe this is a foolish question, but I want to ask you, as someone that was at that game in person in Tuscaloosa when Alabama took down Georgia and watched, Alex, that was one of the best quarters. I think that was the best quarter of football I've ever seen a team play. That was the best I've ever seen a quarterback play, what Jalen Milroe did. Like, from the Bama perspective, is there any hope that this team can be that? Or do you more so write that off as that was just one great quarter and one great half of football?
I think this week will tell a lot of that. I mean, because of the extra week of preparation, I think cynically you could look at what happened in the first quarter and everything that happened afterwards and say that was as simple as Georgia not knowing what to expect from Alabama offensively because it's a whole new scheme. Georgia never had to prepare for Kalen DeBoer offense before, so they found their footing. Now, I think that's probably an oversimplification, right? Like Jalen Milroe had to go out and make plays, and boy, did he ever. I mean, he was assertive running the football. He knew where he wanted to go in the passing game. I still remember that wheel route to Jam Miller down the sideline. Like, that is a perfect pass. So can he regain that? I think there's a possibility, yes, but they've got a lot of work to rebound to get there because, as I said, there's a lot of consternation over Jalen Milroe right now here in terms of what he is as a quarterback. Is he that high end quarterback that we saw against Georgia, or is he a guy with some pretty big deficiencies as we've seen the last few weeks? I think he's got to get his confidence back and just be a more, a quarterback who says first read, second read, third read. If it's not there, bolt. He played assertively against Georgia. If you can see that again against not as talented of a defense in LSU, I think we could have a little bit more good feelings again. But there's a lot of unsuredness, if that's even the right word or a word to use, because there was consistency for almost 2 decades for under Nick Saban. I think everybody's trying to figure out what the water level is with Kalen DeBoer as the head coach and Jalen Milroe as the quarterback.
You mentioned, Alex, it all comes down to this Saturday night again for both sides. This is a college football playoff eliminator, and even if it wasn't, it's LSU and Alabama. It's Alabama and LSU. You don't need much more hype than that. When you look at the LSU Tigers, again, LSU coming off the bye week as well, of course. The last time we saw them on the field was in College Station, took a pretty tough loss to Texas A&M, but still a really talented football team. They only have one conference loss. Alex, what do you see from them in regards to maybe, say, matchups where you think Alabama can exploit them and have the advantage? And then what are some areas that you look at LSU and it gives you some concerns for Alabama on Saturday night?
I think it's all going to be about tackles for losses and sacks. It's negative plays. And whether Alabama can create those defensively and make Garrett Nussmeier uncomfortable. We covered where Alabama stands as a secondary. Again, they've overperformed. Damani Jackson's played really well. Xavier Brown has had his moments. Malachi Moore on the back end. They're without Keon Sabb. So there's a little bit of shakiness there. And can you get to the quarterback with that offensive line, like I said? But on the other side of the ball, I think it's the same situation. Alabama has killed itself being behind the sticks this year. Negative plays and getting in the second and third and longs have doomed them on a lot of games. I mean, the Tennessee game, that was the issue. South Carolina game, some of it's unforced errors. Some of it is just getting beat at the line of scrimmage. They need to cut that down because that is what LSU does very well. I would argue LSU is a solid defense. I don't know that they've proven they're good or great, but they do one thing very well, which is create negative plays and create pressure on the quarterback. So I'm very curious to see, how the Alabama offensive line holds up. They've had a lot of continuity after some injuries early in the season up front, where you talk about the starting five really playing together, but do they roll out Jalen Milroe? Do they throw some swing passes to the running backs? Can they just get a downhill running game going to negate that pass rush? I think those are things I'm going to be looking for early on.
Alex, I know it's year one for Kalen DeBoer, obviously, so to call any game like a must-win is just, I think it's missing the mark a little bit. It's year one. But like you mentioned, there's been consistency under Nick Saban for, essentially 2 decades. And funny enough, he's going to be there this weekend with College Game Day. He's going to be on site, probably going to be on the sideline. So at least the aura of Nick Saban will be in the building and on campus. But, I was at that game, Alex, in Knoxville, third Saturday in October, and it felt like from the Tennessee perspective, despite all the previous history, hey, Nick Saban's no longer there. We can start kind of a new chapter in the rivalry. Like, I have to imagine for Bama, too, it's continuing to, keep the established order that Alabama has said is important to the fan base, to the program. Again, you drop that one at Tennessee. I'm not calling this a must-win, Alex, but what's the dynamic of this one just for Kalen DeBoer? Because he's not going to get 5-6 years, right? Like, I mean, it's got to, by the time we get to year 3, we're probably going to know, or at least the fan base is going to feel like they know, how important is this one for Kalen DeBoer? And, because I think we all had realistic expectations for him in year 1, but missing the playoff is going to be a really tough pill to swallow for the folks in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, going into the season, I said a successful season was make the playoff or at least be like right there. Mm-hmm. If they lose this game, they're obviously not in that predicament. Now, could we have seen the way it was going to happen? I think everybody probably looked at the Georgia game as a loss. Mm-hmm. So that game really threw expectations out of whack. But while we're talking about expectations, I do think it's important to note, like, Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. I'm not going to sit here and argue that. But the way the last 3 or 4 years of the program went, the dominant part of it that people still hold in their mind changed. The transfer portal changed that. NIL changed that. Unlimited transfers changed that. It really leveled the playing field to a point where those kind of games like the one in Knoxville, or if they lose at LSU this weekend, I'm not sure those things wouldn't still be happening under Nick Saban. So do fans want to hear that? No, of course they don't. They still expect to win at a high level, but I think that has to be part of the equation when you're talking about a new coaching staff, 40 new scholarship players on the roster. That's almost half of your scholarship players that are brand new, trying to figure out a different situation in which you don't have 6 first-round draft picks. So, what is successful? You got to be competitive in this game, to say the least. I don't know that it's a must-win as much as it is figure into the playoff. I think the only must-win on the schedule is Auburn, because that would just be, in the Alabama fans' point of view, tragic to lose to them. But you have to be competitive. And boy, if you can get this one done, I think it puts you in a really solid spot as a coaching staff to say, even if we make the playoff and lose in the first round, we've proven we can be competitive. And if you give us time to get our system in, to for everyone to know what we're doing, to get some steadiness in terms of the roster, it's going to steadily improve. So it's tricky, probably non-answer I'm giving you, but it's complicated. I think at the end of the day, Alabama football in the year 2024 with Nick Saban on College Game Day every Saturday is complicated.
Alex, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but in your mind, when you look at this football game, if Alabama is going to go into Death Valley at night in Baton Rouge, a place they've won a lot, by the way, and beat LSU, is there a specific key or keys to the game in your mind for the Crimson Tide?
Keep it simple. It's Jalen Milroe. I mean, I think if Alabama wins, we're going to be talking about Jalen Milroe being back in the Heisman conversation. If Alabama loses, I think we're going to be continuing to talk about what's going on with Jalen Milroe. And look, there's a lot that goes into it, as I've said. Pass protection, running game, defense. Those things are all hugely important. But this team is built in such a way that it is Jalen Milroe who's driving the car. I mean, he's got the keys. He's the guy who was a top 10 Heisman finisher a year ago, coming back for another year in a new offense. He has all the talent in the world. He just needs to put it on the field and show it. And when you've got Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams at receiver, and you're going into LSU, these are the moments you're supposed to have. So I have a feeling he could be in for a big rebound game. And I think for Alabama to win, based on what I think they're going to probably give up on the defensive side of the football, I think it's going to be incumbent on him to score a few touchdowns in a big way.
Alex Scarborough, Bama 24/7, does a fantastic job. Alex, as always, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
My pleasure.